Hey everybody, Derek here to bring another video for The Walking Dead Season 6. And what this video is going to be doing is a predictions video for Carl. Basically, after the events of, Season 5, Season 6, and some of the events that he has coming up in the comics, will he become more of a ruthless character, kind of like how he is in the comic books? I've noticed a lot of significant differences between the two characters, and I feel like it's worth exploring. If you are not caught up with the television show, or if you're not caught up with the comics, then this video will contain spoilers. So if you do not want to be spoiled, don't watch the video, otherwise you will be spoiled. Okay. So first off, let me talk a little bit about Carl in the television show. As we know, Carl is probably approximately 13 to 15 years old right now in the comics. In the TV show. In the comics, he's a lot younger. I think he's even like age 10 or less as it starts. And I think that as we've gotten later on into the comics, I think he is more around maybe 13 years old or so. Not 100% sure about how old he is. But in the television show, Carl is a lot older. And, we've noticed that his character, the first two seasons, he was pretty much just, held back. People would tell him, no, you're not getting involved with things. Go to the house, stay in the house. But Carl, being his, child self, is curious, wants to explore a little bit, and wants to be involved with things, which is something that is very prominent with his character. Carl wants to be involved with decisions and responsibilities, which the group does eventually, really, in a sense, form that bridge between him being an adult and him being a child. And it's tough, for children to grow up in this kind of world, because that's really the question, just at what point do you say, hey, this is a dangerous world, these kids need to grow up and, take on these responsibilities, versus saying, well, kids are kids, and they shouldn't be exposed to certain things until they're a little older. I see both sides of the argument. Well, Season 3 is a very big turning point for Carl's character because he loses Lori. Lori does die in Season 3 when the walkers invade the prison, and she goes into childbirth and unfortunately does not make it. And Carl has to shoot his mother in the head, to prevent her from coming back as a walker. Now, whether she was alive when he did it, or whether she was dead, we don't really know for certain. But that was a very terrible thing that Carl had to do, and I think it had a lot of impact on him. And it also was, Carl wanting to step up and wanting to be responsible as an adult. But the thing of it is, and it's just a biological, observation, it's not, against children in any way, but it is a proven psychological and biological fact that children cannot make important decisions like that, because the reasoning power, in the front of their brain just is not fully developed. Most children can't think of consequences. It depends on the person. And, with Carl, you kind of see a lot of that, where Carl wants to do things, but he doesn't necessarily think about the repercussions later on that it may have. And I think that was very prevalent with him shooting Jody. I think that a lot of that was, he saw a threat. Whereas maybe if Rick or somebody else would have been in the same situation, they'd have realized, look, this is a kid. Jody is probably not much older than Carl, and maybe we should give him a chance, make him surrender. But Carl shoots him in cold blood, and that really, is a big turning point for Carl, because, that does fit more with his comic book character. But Season 4, we see Carl come back a little bit, where because of the situation, because of the prison, he has, in a sense, become more like a child again, more like a kid, but a mature one, one with responsibilities, one that's, more innocent, if you will, as a character. And that is expressed throughout Season 4 for the most part, and then we get to Season 5, and we see that Carl is very hopeful for the world. And I give credit, and I enjoy this. Carl wants to help people. He tells Rick when they meet up with Gabriel, Dad, we're strong enough that we can help people. And that is something that I think Carl has held within him ever since, season four's events. Now, in the comics, though, he's not so much like that. He is a little bit more ruthless, and he's less hopeful about the world and less trusting of individuals. And in fact, it's the lack of, people doing things that frustrates Carl. We see in the comics, especially around this time, when the Savior's War comes, Carl's very, upset about the fact that nobody's doing anything, that, nobody's taking the fight to the Saviors. And again, that might just be a little bit of that, can't think of the consequences later on. And, Carl ends up going to the Savior's compound, the sanctuary, and kills several of them, which impresses Negan. But we see that there is this side of Carl that really is a lot like Rick when he's in those states. I mean, Carl is willing to kill people, and in fact, maybe even more ruthless than his father is. He wanted to kill Negan. He flat out wanted to kill him, and Rick said, no, we're not killing him. And that's something that does not sit well with Carl. You also have, which is a scene coming up maybe later on in the TV show, but in the comics, there's a bridge of time in between volumes 21 and 22, which was the end of the Savior's War, and, when they established Alexandria, the Hilltop, the Sanctuary, and the Kingdom, all as communities that are working together. There's an incident where these two boys at the Hilltop attack Sophia, and Carl basically beats the bejesus out of them with a shovel. I mean, just absolutely just, beats them very badly, which shows that Carl has this inner, demon, if you would, within him. He, thinks more violently rather than rationally, I think. Now, with the TV show, I have to wonder if they're going to start to, develop that within his character. Because if you remember in JSS, there was that scene where that wolf was chasing after Ron, and he shot the wolf in the leg. And the wolf, starts to, no, man, don't shoot me, I surrender, please, pleading for his life. But of course, it's a fake, it's a front to try to get a hold of Carl's gun. And the guy turns around and just starts grabbing the gun, and Carl ends up shooting him. And that's the second person that Carl has killed on screen, if I'm not mistaken. His first was Jody, and now this wolf. And part of me really wonders if with the turning of, the way that things are, if we're going to see Carl start to maybe be less hopeful of people, that maybe he is going to reach that point where, he thinks of people as more dangerous than worth giving a chance, to help them, kind of like how he did with Gabriel. And I think that several events from the comics, if they happen to him in the TV show, are drastically going to change his perception. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. One, obviously, would be the loss of his eye. If you're familiar with the comics, in Volume 14, Douglas, when the Walkers invade the Alexandria's walls, Douglas wants to kill himself. He is upset about his wife dying because of Pete, and, he tries to shoot himself but can't bring himself to do it. So what does he do? He goes out into the herd and just starts randomly firing off shots into the Walker herd. And Carl ends up getting his eye shot out. It was an accident, but Carl almost dies. He survives because of Dr. Denise, but he has this big hole in I think it's the right side of his face. This eye is missing. And it's a very gruesome, image. It's this big hole in his face, which obviously would definitely, look unfortunate, and it's something that affects Carl, especially for somebody who's that young. I mean, no matter what age it happens at, it's definitely going to be devastating to lose a body part, no matter what part it is. But I think that when you're older, you're a little more mature, I think that, you can see it differently. Whereas if it's a child that it happens to, it's definitely something that's harder for them to deal with. And I think with Carl, having to look at that hole in his face and having to have other individuals look at it and cringe when he's not wearing his glasses because he has like a blackened lens that would cover this. People are obviously shocked by the appearance. And later on in the comics, Carl says, even to Rick, he's like, you can't even look at it without, shuddering or, being very, sickened by it. And that's something that affects Carl. And I think that it really has made him more of a person that is going to act out. And sometimes you see that with individuals, if somebody is bullied, time and time again, over time, that has an effect on somebody. And sometimes it makes the person lash out because, they reach their breaking point. And I think with Carl, I think you see a little bit of that, where he has this unfortunate, mark on his face, which makes him upset at the way that things are. He doesn't like the fact that he lost it, and I can't blame him. And I think that it causes him to act out violently because he's upset about that. And I wouldn't doubt that if that happens to him in the comics, and depending on how it happens, it may change his perspective a lot. And here's what I think there's a good possibility of happening is, I don't think Carl's going to lose his eye in the same way if he does in the television show. I don't think it's going to be an accident. I think, honestly, if Carl loses his eye, it is going to be because somebody either shoots it out on purpose or stabs it out, gouges it out, something. And I thought about something here. What if it's Ron? We've noticed that Ron has been very, aggressive towards Carl ever since the events of, Conquer. Obviously, Ron is upset that his father is dead. Even though Pete was an abusive man, he abused Jesse, and of course he abused Ron to the point where he gave Ron an injury so that he can't raise one of his arms above his head. Jesse says this. But, I do understand that, sometimes those relationships can be complicated. We may dislike certain things about individuals, but we may still have love for them. I mean, there's family members that have alcohol problems, drug problems. Doesn't mean we don't necessarily love them, nonetheless. So I can understand the conflict within Ron, and I think that it's tough, especially when you're living in the same community where the killer of your father is walking around. And I think that there may be a chance that Ron still holds a lot of animosity towards Rick. And he might do either one of two things. He might eventually go after Rick. That maybe he forms this plan of, I'm going to go and attack Rick. And maybe Carl gets in the way. And as a result, Carl is the one that is hurt versus Rick. Another possibility is that maybe Carl and Ron do fight. That, in a sense, Enid was Ron's girlfriend. But it seems that Enid is forming more of a connection with Carl. And the fact of the matter is, losing somebody that you love is definitely tough. But even for a person Ron's age, think about it. Try losing your father and your girlfriend all within a matter of days. Even the regular, adult would have a problem with a lot of those terrible events happening all at once. Try being, maybe 15, 16 years old and having it happen to you. That would absolutely be devastating. And I think that he may blame Carl for a lot of it, and he may attack Carl. The two of them may have a fight, and that results in, Carl and Ron having a fight, and maybe Ron does gouge his eye out or stab his eye out. I think that's a very good possibility, too, that might happen. We might also have, and this is another big spoiler from the comics, so if you still don't want to know, I suggest maybe you even stop watching now because this is a major spoiler. In the comics, Ron is younger like Carl is. And Ron ends up dying because walkers eat him. They were moving through the herd, and the walkers end up finding out that they're people, because they cover themselves in walker guts. And Ron ends up getting eaten. As a result, Jesse's holding on to Ron's hand, won't let go. She ends up getting bitten too and almost gets Carl killed, and Rick has to chop her arm off with his hatchet in order to save Carl. One thing that I was thinking about, because there's no Sam in the comics, but Sam seems to be taking the place of Ron. What if Sam and Jesse do die in the comics? I mean, well, in the television show in season 6, just like how they die in the comics. Pardon me, sorry. So, what if Jesse and Sam die in the television show the same way that Jesse and Ron die in the comics? And Ron sees this. What if he blames Rick for it, and just either in that moment or maybe after the events of what happens, maybe they clear the walkers, Ron comes out and finds his brother and his mother are dead, and he tries to take a shot at Rick, blaming Rick for losing his entire family, and instead he hits Carl. And then maybe they kill Ron. I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities here, but I think that Ron is going to be responsible for Carl losing his eye. And I think that having that experience, as well as his experience lately with the Wolves, may change Carl's perspective a lot. And I think that we may end up seeing more of an unforgiving Carl, more of one who is angry at the world, one who does not accept that people are going to get better. And we may see more of that season 3 Carl come to the forefront as a result of him losing his eye. And I think it may happen. And if it does, I don't think we're going to see Carl like he is now. I think he's going to change, maybe for the worse. We'll find out. But I think it's coming, and I think it will happen. So let me know what you guys think. Do you think I'm on the right track? Do you think I'm not? What do you guys think is going to... Excuse me. Sorry, I can't talk tonight. What do you guys think is going to happen to Carl? Feel free to subscribe. I do have more videos coming. And if you have any suggestions for future videos that you would like to see, don't be afraid to suggest them. Have a wonderful evening, everybody. Thank you very much for watching.